Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. I really enjoyed yesterday's class. He brought up some really key points that I enjoyed. We were just chatting about it, where he talked about the two mitzvot that seemed to be the same thing, but he brought it out as one was a positive and one was a negative, and he clarified how that people should be teaching their children, not just all knows or all do's, but explain the positives and the negatives behind the matter at hand, so that there's legitimate understanding of recourse, and it just makes things come alive, and it's a great way to parent for sure. So I thought that explanation for why two mitzvot seem like the same thing in Torah made a lot of sense, and so I'm hoping we'll get some more beautiful material today. So let's just tune in. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. So good to be with you, and you're live on the air. We're going to turn the class over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thanks for the introduction and the challenge. So I'm sharing the screen. Let's see, it should be up here, okay? And last time, so those two things came on 44 and 45, fasting and Kippur, and do not eat or drink. It's a positive, negative, so we spoke about that. We're up to respect the temple sanctuary and do not enter the sanctuary when impure, which is another form of it, but they're not quite the same. They're not quite the same as the two above. Respect the temple sanctuary is there's a holy place. God, we deal in places. God's everywhere, but equally everywhere. But for us, it helps us to hold a particular place in high esteem. So, and that's not only true of the temple, but it's true of every holy place where you congregate to serve God. Synagogues, or it could be church, or a temple, or a mosque, where people honestly gather to respect God. So that place ought to be respected. That you've got to treat it different. Everybody understands that you behave differently within there. So that's an instruction that we have, and particularly there's some, you certainly don't want to swear. There, use foul language. There's things about wearing a money bag, which would be sort of emphasizing the materialistic aspect of your life is not the thing to do when you're there. So there's details. As I said, we're just running through for the broad idea, not all the details. So I think that people can understand the need to respect the holy places and do not enter. But the sanctuary, when impure, now I didn't get a chance to really research this, but there's this idea of impurity. And impurity is some invisible status. It's conveyed, the most serious source of it is a dead body. And so the idea is that life is what it's all about, and death is inevitable. But when someone's dead, so it's like you're dead, like you realize you're going to die, and so that defeats you. Defeats your outlook, your goals, your will to live forever. So that's considered an impurity of spirit, and you've got to get rid of that. There's ways to purify that, because it can infest. Well, today we have people get depressed, and we have no way out. Well, we do. We have to give them drugs and exercises or whatever, and it's a real problem. So maybe this impurity was, say, a pseudo status to avoid depression, because this you cannot see it. It's you could be happy, go lucky, and whatever, and you came across a dead body, you're impure. So it's an invisible status. Okay, so it's something to deal with now. Frankly, I'm not even sure. I can't remember if there's certainly different levels. The Kohanim, like I've explained, the Kohanes, they were most susceptible to this. They if that happened to them, then their activity was grossly restricted. Whereas, and they couldn't enter into the temple when they were impure to do their service, and have to get purified. Regular Jews, not so much impure, because we didn't have to go into the temple. And then non-Jews, it also works differently. So there's different stages of it. There's other things that bring impurity, certain kinds of dead animals and carcasses and so on. So just a really large body of knowledge around it, and it's it's hard to learn because we don't practice it today for the most part, because the final act of getting out of it is using the ashes of the red heifer, which is a mysterious process ritual that even King Solomon, the wisest of all men, said, I give up. I don't understand how that works, but we're confident that there is a reason, there is a rationale, but it's a divine rationale. We're not going to understand it, but we know that this is what works, and it's kind of like the medicines that your doctor prescribes. You don't know how they work, but you trust them, you take them. So same thing here. We can't do that anymore. So we're all really living in a state of impurity, and so Jews do not enter into the to the top of the mountain, called the mountain of the house, where now sits the Golden Dome Mosque behind the Western Wall. Jews don't go there because we're impure. We can't get pure, and so we don't go into those grounds. And that's the main thing that how we practice that today. Going on to the next one, another two in a row of um, of something we really can't do today, but it's still valid, and that is there was a special anointing oil of the temple. Um, I believe that Moshe formulated. I know that Moshe formulated the first batch. I believe they kept that batch lasted forever. They I don't know that they ever had to concoct it again. But there's a rule: don't you do it. Don't replicate that exact formula. If you add a little thing or subtract a little thing, that's okay. But you're not allowed to do that. That's a form of respect of the temple, of the sacred sanctuary, or the sacred anointing, making holy with that special oil. It's really a sort of like holding the hand of Moshe. Using something he concocted. He was the one that got closest to God. So there's a lot of emotion that could be built into that, and that's how we observe it. And the incense, Moshe also concocted that first batch, but then they had to make more over the years. And it also had a very special formula. By the way, we don't know the formulas. We don't know the exact formulas. We're not sure what the exact formulas are. In fact, even in those days, they weren't sure what the exact formulas were. There were certain families that knew the secret of how to produce this oil and this incense, and they were in charge of producing it. And so, and you weren't allowed to replicate it for yourself. So you still can't, and it's still an idea that you can be aware of. So it connects you with that time and that sense of holiness. But we can't. We really have no opportunity to to transgress that idea. So it's just there. Now the next one is is sort of the same idea, but not so inactive. Do not follow your hearts and eyes. This is a sentence towards the end of the paragraph, the third paragraph, the Shema, the one that talks about tzitzis, about the fringes on the four corner garment that we reviewed a few days ago, and or before Passover. And in the same paragraph, there's a completely different idea, and that is not to follow your hearts and eyes. And they say that, well, your eyes see something, and then your heart desires it. And the subject of the eyes is lust, and the subject of the hearts is heresy. But you can't really spell out what is you do, other than to say, don't make physical pleasure your goal, your life's purpose, because it's not. And don't investigate false ideas that lead you, starting off with false. I mean, if you have a problem, if you can't understand something and something's bothering you, you have to get an answer. I understand that, but if you know that there's a whole system of yeah, and you're not really attracted, but you're curious. don't be curious. Don't go there. Um, you're just asking for trouble. So you're better off. You got plenty to study that you know is holy, that you know is right-minded, that you know is useful and beneficial. So spend your time on that. So that, and now the interesting thing about this one is this is number 6 in a short list of 6, and that list of 6 was introduced by the chinuch, the educator, who's the one that wrote a book that identified all the mitzvahs in the order that they appear in the Torah. And he's the only guy that wrote that kind of book. And he actually wrote it for his grandson, who was a young man, or even maybe still a teenager at the time. And but it's considered a very scholarly work. And there was many commentaries written, one primary commentary written after that. And there's a number of features of this book that make it stand out. One is the order. He's going in the order of how it appears in the Torah, which is not necessarily any logical fashion that we can detect. Just God decided to introduce this idea, then this idea, and that idea, so they're all mixed up, and there's no the standard conclusion is there's no logical order in the Torah of these things. There's it's sort of like a story. I remember reading it. The story, sometimes authors, they'll make long stories. They'll start with one character and then they'll skip to another character and give you a whole thing about that, and then come back to the first character, or maybe 3 characters, like they mix it up, and then it finally comes together. So they got that idea from the Torah. You mix it up and you keep coming back and so on. So it's stylistic. It's a useful way of compressing a lot of information. Okay, back to the 6. So there are 6 mitzvahs. Oh, so this chinuch fellow, which means the educator, he listed the mitzvahs. He's also the only one that gave reasons for them. Now we have a determination that we don't know the reason why God gave the instructions, because it's God's mind, it's divine mind, it's an infinite mind. Don't think that you know the infinite mind. However, you can learn from the activity that God must have had this result, because this is the normal result. This is certainly a prominent feature of the mitzvah. So you see that God wanted this to come about. That you can say. You can't say this is the ultimate reason, but you can say this is a reason. So he does that, and not many do. So that's another reason it became famous. So that's the background on the chinuch. Reason I've got into him is to say he's also, another thing that he said that nobody else said was that there are 6 mitzvahs, 6 instructions that are constant, continuous, the constant instructions. So how can you have, in other words, they're always applicable, they're always in motion. Now you can't do 6 things at once. I can't do 2 things at once. My wife can do 2 or 3, but I can't do more than 1. And most men can't. And most women can, but not 6 all at the same time with equal intensity. So what does it mean? So my Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, explained that it means these mitzvahs are talking about who you have to be, not act. They're not actions. They're a sense of being. They're an inner conviction. And the 6 mitzvahs are: know there's a God, know that there's no other God. That's 2, and there's the positive and negative going together. Love God, fear God, or respect God. That's 4. And know that God is one is 5, and this is the 6th. Don't follow your hearts and eyes. Now, to tell you the truth, I never understood why this is. It is a negative, so obviously it's not something you're doing all the time. But some people will say you're always enticed. There's always something in front of you that's distracting you and leading you down the wrong way, and you have to be on guard against that. There's another mitzvah though in the list that I think, the positive mitzvah, that I think is the opposite, the alternate, the corresponding one, and that is be like God. Be like God. Now, be like God is a state of being. To be like God. And the way I understand that, and I think I've spoken about it, was easier earlier on in the list. The way I understand that mitzvah is that just like God is constantly in control of everything, you have to be in control. And of course, the only thing you can really control is yourself. So you have to be in control of yourself. You have to be in control of your reactions to the situations that arise. Should you be angry? Should you be loving? Should you be laughing? Should you be derisive? Whatever the reaction is, it has to be measured. It has to be. It has to be with wisdom behind it. It has to be advancing a certain understanding of life and a certain effort that you're trying to instill in your family, in your community, and so on. So everything you do, look, people are watching everything you do. Always, your kids, your friends, your spouse. Everybody's cognizant of what you do, and you're an example. And you're using other people, for example, but it's certainly it's the relationship that I spoke about in the heart of the book, that we're all a bunch of relationships, and we affect each other by the examples we give. So this is the negative, that's the positive in my mind, and that's the what it's all about, and it's a constant thing. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going to go on now to the next bunch, 51 through 64. They commemorate God's hand in history. For example, Exodus and Sinai, as testimony to God's continuing interest in our affairs. He didn't invent us and leave. He's continually interested. He's monitoring it all the time. He's keeping us alive by thinking of us. This harkens back to the middle of the category, pray for help, because God's always listening, and he's listening and he's watching. If you're asking for help, he's mindful. He's going to react. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. So the first one is declare Shabbos holy with words. Now, I don't have keep Shabbos. I don't do any work on Shabbos or rest on Shabbos, because it's Shabbos is a special day that it's a sign. It's called a sign, and just like I spoke about another sign, the tefillin. I mentioned the phylacteries, the leather boxes that go on our arm and our head, are a sign. And a sign has to stand out from the environment. It has to be something different. Otherwise, it's not a sign. It's just part of the environment. It's like everything else. A sign has to be something standing out. So Shabbos has to stand out, not working. And the Jews are the ones that that present that sign. There's a bunch of people not working. Okay. But this one is a different. So there's actually three mitzvahs, three instructions in the 613 that deal with Shabbos. The two others that I don't mention are rest on Shabbos and don't work on Shabbos, which are the positive and negative of the same idea, that we spoke about last night. And they refer to actually a great number of things. There's 39 activities that are identified as possibly being a work that can't be done on Shabbos, and that you should rest from. And there's a lot of literature on there. But this one is totally different. And this one, I think, applies to everybody. Declare Shabbos holy with words. And that is, Shabbos still is a special day, because it's the last day of creation. It's a 7-day cycle. And pretty well the whole world is keeping that cycle. And the weekend become a 2-day weekend, mostly because the Christians wanted to celebrate Sunday, and we have Friday, Saturday. Muslims never quite made it into a 3-day weekend, although that may be coming soon. So I think that's how we got a 2-day weekend. But at any rate, Shabbos is holy with words. What are we doing there? So I was thinking about this one day, and I came up with a very interesting idea, and that is this. Why should we declare Shabbos holy the way we do? We do it after Shabbos has started, the Jewish people. So we go to synagogue and there's special prayers, and then come home and there's a special meal. And as we start the meal, we say a kiddush. It's called kiddush. We're sanctifying God we're making it holy with words. We're just declaring today is Shabbos and it's a holy day, and we have a cup of wine over that. That's how we declare Shabbos holy with words. But it's after Shabbos started. So why are you doing it then? If you should declare, it makes sense to me. What you should do is that as Shabbos is starting, or just before, 5 minutes before, you say, "Hey, Shabbos is starting. Everybody, stop working. Go to rest." So because it's a very serious matter, you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. You want to warn people, and in fact, and that's what they do in Israel. In many communities, there's horns go off, sirens, as a regular course, not because there's a war, but just alerting everybody. It's now half an hour to Shabbos. Get your shopping done, get home, take your shower, and then there's another like 5 minute blast, and it's heard throughout the community. It's a warning sign. So that would make more sense. So why do we'll do it the way we do? And so I was thinking about that, and then it occurred to me that why do we have to? You don't have to say anything because you stop working. You see, it's a different day. It's a totally different day. So what is it? This idea that you have to make a declaration. And so I thought maybe normally we declare something where it's a great we want to say thank you or acknowledge something. So what was it we're acknowledging? So well, if you look at creation, every day of creation, God created something more sophisticated than the day before. Starting with just the energy, the Big Bang or light, however you want to describe it, and then the sky, and then land, and the seas, and plant life, and the sun and the moon, and so on, and then finally animals, and then us. What would have happened had God stopped working on Shabbos, and so we commemorate that He stopped working. So what would have happened had He not stopped working on Shabbos? What would He have done? What would God have done if He just kept going and creating something? Well, since every day He was creating something more sophisticated than the day before, we were day 6. If He would have created something on day 7, it would have been something more sophisticated than us. And in that case, we would feel like a nothing. We would say, you guys, whatever it is, something more sophisticated, like angels maybe, or angels to walk the earth. So you guys do it. What do you look at the rest for? You're the ones that are in charge, and we'd be a nothing. So really, you're thanking God when you're recognizing that God stopped working on Shabbos. He stopped creating. You're thanking God for stopping and leaving you in charge. Humanity's in charge of the world. We're the most sophisticated thing that God was prepared to make. Stop. So we have to recognize that. We have a responsibility. We have to declare it, that this is the day that made us responsible for everything. So that's what I think is the idea behind declaring Shabbos holy words. I think everybody should do it. I think it'll be truly, when you have this idea in mind, and you're saying, like, God stopped working on this day, you left me in charge. I got work to do. And that would be, I think, a very holy realization. Okay, so that was the first special day. Thank you. The next one is Passover. And Passover, we have a number of things that Jews do, and Passover was the idea of coming out from under someone else dictating what you do and coming into your own. And there's a lot of messages the way it was done. And but let's just step back and say, look, the Jewish people have been a bellwether, a canary in the mine, whatever. We've been an icon all through history. People have hated us, or they've worked with us, or they've learned from us, or they've copied us. But we introduced the Bible. We brought Sinai to the world, or God brought us to Sinai. I'm not going to take credit for it, but the existence of the Jewish people became a necessary event in the structure of the universe. That's what God was saying when He took us out of Egypt and made us into His nation, His people. That I needed a people that were dedicated to a certain task, and that affects the whole world. It's not just the Jews; it's everybody. So Pesach is a time to recognize that, and the concomitant messages that go with it. So that's why I think that it's an opportunity for non-Jews to participate as well. They don't have to say I can't do that or I don't want to. You could develop an interest to say I want to reenact or participate in these events or these actions in order to remind myself of the messages they contain because they're useful. So destroy or disown chametz on Pesach Eve is one of the instructions. That's because chametz is flour and water they make bread from. Chametz is bread, and the bread becomes the staple by letting it rise. It's the matzah is the opposite. There's no time to rise. That's what's described in the Torah. They didn't have time to let the dough rise, so they had to eat matzah, and you got to be busy. That's the message. If you're just sitting around waiting for things to happen, that's no good. Now, normally you do have to wait around because God understands that He gave us that beautiful chametz. It's so tasty. It's such a great staple, and so on. But there's got to be a time when you realize that you can't sit around and wait for things to happen. So Pesach's that time. We remind ourselves about that, and we do it really intensely. We get rid of all the chametz in the house and for 7 days, and then along with that, the next one, eat matzah on the first night, because that is it's got a dual identity. One is that it's poor man's bread. We're not here to enjoy ourselves, really. Everybody thinks they are, but and it should be enjoyable. Well, it's not the enjoyable of a physical pleasure. It's the enjoyment of the spiritual magnificence that you can create for yourself and for everybody else around you. So matzah represents that. And matzah also has a number of messages. It's called the bread of freedom and the bread of poverty, because they had to eat it going out. In order to become free, you have to give up some things. And so that's what they gave up. They gave up the chametz they were going to weigh around. And so it's so stringent that I should have had the next two after not destroying the chametz. There's also an idea of not owning chametz. So this is an example of how the Torah really doubled down on this idea, because the next two, do not find chametz during Pesach and do not see chametz during Pesach, both mean do not own chametz during Pesach. That's all they mean. And so if you're in violation of finding chametz because it's yours, then you're also in violation of seeing chametz even though you didn't see it. And if you see chametz because that is yours, then you're in violation of finding it, because even though you didn't find it, you knew it was there, whatever. They both mean the same thing. They're just worded differently. And it's the only example in the entire Torah. While we have many examples, like I explained before, of positives and negatives telling us to do the same thing, this is the only example of two negatives telling us to do this, not to do the same thing. And that's just an example of doubling down. Just God said, let me say this again in a different way. And we're going to count it. We're going to count it as two. So if you're really, whatever you do that's in violation of this idea, you're in violation of two ideas, two expressions. So two of the 613. So that's a way of emphasizing that idea. And then, of course, do not eat chametz mixture during Pesach, all through Pesach, and a mixture, and then I eat chametz itself during Pesach. So all these things are just really a real doubling down, because so many you got to destroy the chametz. You have to not to even own it. You have not to eat it, not to eat a mixture of it. Normally, like there's not kosher meat. So if you can't eat not kosher meat, you can eat a mixture of not kosher meat. That goes without saying. But here's a special instruction not to eat a chametz mixture. So all these things tell us that God went a little crazy on this subject to draw our attention to it, and He has. It was successful. In Jewish communities, the Passover is an existential event. It changes. Your diet changes. We have first meal that'll be the next one we'll talk about next time we get together. The telling over the story. I'll give you a little more about that, but it's really it's hard to become free, and you have to give up some things and be serious about it to really gain your own freedom. That's just a general statement, and it took a lot of messages from God to give it to us, and a lot of activity on our part to bring it home. So, so leave it at that, and we're up to number 58. No, number 58, just past Heinz 57. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thank you everybody for joining us, and
We're off till Sunday, right?
we're off till Sunday. That's right.
All right, folks. So that's our Zoom Daily today with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map meaning. I hope you're enjoying this. I sure am. I'm picking up all kinds of little tidbits. The beautiful explanations are really helping for sure. So we're going to sign out for tonight, but we will be back this Sunday at the same time. And that is 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. If you want to participate in the Zoom room, I do have a registration form available, or you can message me on Facebook, Dan Barwell, and I'd be glad to give you the Zoom link and get you included in with Rabbi Shlomo's emails. But yeah, thank you so much, Rabbi Schwartz, and Shabbat Shalom to you, and we will see you Sunday evening.
Thank you to you all.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye bye.